of socialism. I think if you look at countries around the world, look at countries in Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, what do they have? Everybody in those countries has health care as a human right.
I'm the only one on that stage that when asked, do you think a socialist should be leading the ticket, you have trouble with that. When George Stephanopoulos asked that question, I'm the only one that raised my hand and said yes.
The battle for the soul of the Democratic Party is joined tonight. Senator Bernie Sanders with what looks like a win. Now it's official in New Hampshire in the primary here, ensuring the debate continues for the foreseeable future. Speaking of debates, let's welcome in Left Coast News host Ethan Behrman, Republican National Lawyers Association co-chair Harmeet Dhillon, and the Next Revolution host Steve Hilton. Welcome to you all.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon. Okay, Forbes has a headline, Why Young Voters Are Embracing Bernie Sanders and Democratic Socialism. They say the schools have not taught much about the ravages of socialism and communism. To young people, socialism is an abstract concept. They are understandably concerned about how they can be self-sufficient, financially independent, and live the American dream, which was promised to them. Steve, sounds like the youngsters are willing to take a chance.
Well, I think it's certainly true to say that they've had a really bad experience with the system as it's been run for the last few years. So it's not surprising they're looking for change. But to leap from that to something completely extreme, which is what socialism is incredibly risky. And I think it's important to point out what it really is. You hear Bernie Sanders talking often about democratic socialism, which he freely accepts as a label, comparing it to what you see in many other countries around the world, particularly in Europe. He points to the Scandinavian countries, other parts of Europe, and so they have that there too. They guarantee healthcare, they have a social welfare system, safety net, and so on. That's not socialism at all. There is a tradition, a more center-left, soft-left kind of politics and ideology in Europe that you see in those countries, but they don't call it socialism, it's called social democracy. What he's talking about, much more centralized government control of the economy and of key services like healthcare. He wants to totally nationalize healthcare. You don't see that even in places like the UK where you have a single payer system. You still have private insurance. What he's talking about is way more extreme than has been applied anywhere in Europe or anywhere, frankly, outside the former Soviet Union and the communist states.
Well, and we had a guest on this show last year. His name is Johan Norberg. He's with the Cato Institute now. Researcher, he's Swedish himself and has put together this documentary about how the Swedes abandoned socialism because it wasn't working there. Here's what he says about that now.
Look, if Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders want America to be more like Sweden, well, then they would have to reform Social Security, introduce school vouchers, abolish taxes on things like inheritance and property, because Sweden has liberalized dramatically in the last few years because we tried socialism.
Ethan, that doesn't sound like a Senator Sanders bag of tricks there. I mean, school choice and all those other things he mentioned.
Well, it's true. And what we're talking about, though, when you hear and talk to these young people in the United States who support Bernie Sanders, what they're saying is actually somewhat inconceivably, I'm agreeing with Steve Hilton on this, which is the idea that health care is provided for everybody, though. That's what the European countries are modeling. That's what they're seeing, and they're tying into this idea that Bernie Sanders and this Medicare for all is the right idea. The Democratic Party is actually clear, and the majority are saying it's really Affordable Care Act that the Republicans have been so busy chipping away at and trying to tear down, and the Trump administration suing to remove pre-existing condition coverage. We're saying, no, we have to make sure that people have access to health care. Whether or not it's that 30% that say we want to nationalize it, the rest of us in the Democratic Party are saying, no, we just need to expand on what President Obama did and make sure that everybody has access to affordable health care.
Okay, here is what Chris Matthews over on another network is saying about, echoing what a lot of people on the left are saying. They're worried about having a socialist, quote unquote, on the ticket against Donald Trump. Here's what he says.
The issue of this campaign, it is that word socialism. Some people like it. Younger people like it. Those of us like me who grew up in the Cold War and saw some aspects of it after visiting places like Vietnam, like I have, and seeing countries like Cuba being there, I've seen what socialism is like. I don't like it. Okay? It's not only not free, it doesn't frickin' work.
Harmeet, he's worried. He's among those who are worried.
Yeah, he's worried. James Carville is worried, but the young people who we're talking about here just roll their eyes and say, "Okay, boomer," when they hear this type of, back to the past commentary. And so when you look at the results tonight in New Hampshire, Shannon, you see that Bernie had a very strong showing in the urban areas and not so much in the wealthier rural areas. And he also had by far a dominating showing amongst under 45 very liberal voters. So what we come out of is that Bernie Sanders' strong showing is really the future of the Democratic Party. And the kind of moderate, let's tweak around the edges that Ethan just described, that's not the core of the party anymore. The party has gone hard left. This is going to be a real problem as they move forward. And I see with these two showings that Bernie Sanders really is the front runner of the Democratic Party, and he represents the future. He's, as Donald Trump tweeted today, he's the one with the energy, and he's the one with the young voters.
But if you add up Klobuchar and Buttigieg's numbers in New Hampshire, the moderates actually still have the majority in New Hampshire. Okay, thanks, Shannon.
We got to leave it there. We'll see what they decide for the nomination and how this plays out in the general. Thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thank you.